Okay, Morgan.
Okay, so yeah, once again, morning everybody. So my name is Morgan Killick. I'm a social entrepreneur, former, in fact, social entrepreneur of the year for the region, and I've been involved in social enterprise for over 20 years now. I'm also one of the founders of the social enterprise network in Sheffield, the SEN, which is currently delivering this program. And for many years, I've been coaching social enterprises through SEGA and other programs of support, and in a number of different capacities. It's fair to say that what you'll see today is a shortened and abbreviated version of the full in-person one-day bootcamp, which is not the only thing on offer from the SEGA program. One-to-one support from advisors and consultants like me is also available. But what we're going to be doing this morning is covering what I call the fundamentals of social enterprise. And the intention of this content really is for people who are just exploring the concept to try and help them understand what it is, or what it isn't perhaps, and for people who have got a social enterprise already established but aren't quite sure exactly how they got there and how it's meant to be run. Hopefully this session will shed some light into that as well. If you do have any questions, do put your hand up, and I'm kind of relying on Pete to interrupt me and ask for ask a question on your behalf or get something clarified. So without further ado then, let's look at the slides that we've got today. So we're slightly late getting underway, but essentially for about the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'll be presenting on fundamentals of social enterprise. Then we'll have a short break, and then we'll aim to wrap up at 12 o'clock. So I want to start by setting the scene, really, taking you all back to why are we here? Why are we doing something? Why are we exploring the concept of social enterprise, or why are we running a social enterprise? I'd like to draw attention to the two sort of big macroeconomic sort of spheres that we have in our country and throughout the Western world. So the first thing that we have is the public sector. So the public sector is the parts of the economy that are funded by taxation, and it is designed to deliver things that are good for society. That is the NHS, schools, police, roads. All of this gets funded from our taxation and delivered by government to benefit everybody. They're great things to have. I mean, we wouldn't like to live in a society without those things, and that's absolutely great that we have that provision. On the other hand, we have the private sector, and that's the parts of the economy that are funded by trading and the pursuit of profit. Private sector organizations deliver things that the market wants us to have. And crucially, without that, there can't be a public sector. It has to exist to generate the tax income in order to fund the great things that the public sector provides. So if you look at all of the organizations in the UK, they typically fall into one or other. They're either funded by taxes and delivering some kind of public good, or funded by people buying and selling things, or private investors that are hoping to make a gain in some way out of investing in a business, to create all of the goods and services that people want to buy. Now, I guess the critique of this a little bit is that some things fall between the two. There are lots and lots of good things that the public sector delivers, but there are also things it just isn't set up for, or doesn't deliver very well. And I was really intrigued to hear from Eben earlier about the kind of culturally sensitive stuff that is required to raise awareness of cardiovascular disease in certain communities, because the public sector doesn't do it very well. And similarly, Edwards, sort of local supply chains for food production and retail. Again, you might think the private sector ought to be able to do that, but somehow it doesn't quite deliver in a way that Ed is happy with. And so we talk about both public sector failure and private sector failure. There are some things that fall in between the two. And this is what I call the third sector, this kind of bit in the middle that captures the fact of there may be something else, something that is potentially driven along private sector principles of being small and dynamic and doing some trading. Not a big bureaucracy, a small organization that one or two people could genuinely found and do something with, but yet somehow it's designed to deliver something that those people think is good for society. So we talk about kind of what is that? That is what I would call the third sector. And in this third sector, we have a whole range of different kinds of organization, typically quite small, but that are trying to deliver some kind of social benefit, but also stay dynamic enough and driven enough by their founders to stay on point for what they're trying to do for their social mission. And looking at everybody here, when you introduce yourselves, this is exactly the kind of language that you're using. You're talking about providing training and events. These are kind of trading things, but you're also trying to achieve some kind of social mission. So, for example, improving the mental health of certain communities, or raising awareness of mental health problems in those communities. So this is what we call the third sector. And like I say, within that third sector, there are a whole variety of different types of organization. Social enterprise is one of those types, but there are others, including charities, for example, or small not-for-profit organizations. That's hopefully trying to give you a little bit of an insight into how you, or where you're coming from into macroeconomic level. So within here, we've got charities, social enterprises, and potentially as well cooperatives. These three are the main forms of third sector organization. And I'm hoping that sort of resonates with people a little bit. Has anyone got a question or an observation about that starting point?
I was just keen to understand, because I think you said potentially cooperatives, and that's sort of the route that we're looking at. Why potentially cooperative?
Why potentially cooperatives? Yeah, absolutely.
Or why not definitely cooperative, I suppose, is the question.
Yes, and I think the answer to that is because the phrase cooperative has multiple meanings, and one of them is to do with the principles by which something is governed. So take for example the co-op. I've literally been in the co-op this morning buying a bit of groceries. That is essentially a private business. It's very much a private organization. It's run on a for-profit basis, but there are other forms of cooperative that are more like a third sector organization, in that they're run along some kind of social mission. Cooperative doesn't really have, the co-op doesn't really have much of a social mission other than to benefit its own members. And we can see that really as a private sector. And for that reason, really, I've consciously drawn this third sector Venn diagram to overlap. You know, there are kind of shades of grey here. There are some cooperatives that might purely be third sector, and some that might be really just private sector and using the fact that they are organized on cooperative principles. Yeah, I think that's the answer, really. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, unless anybody has any other questions. Okay. So again, to kind of recap why we're here, and I'm hoping that when I make these bullet points, you're going to go, yeah, okay, that is what I see myself doing, or what we see ourselves doing. and where we're coming from, I suppose. So what I'm saying is the activities of both the private and the public sector create failures and gaps. Sometimes we might even say opportunities. So, for example, the NHS, it can treat low-level mental health conditions using talking and pharmaceutical inventions, but often that support is too long a wait or not right for certain groups of people. That's a failure and a gap which you're coming about filling. That leads then to an opportunity to improve how people, or potentially the planet, are treated. What I'm saying is founders like you are kind of rethinking and innovating to find new ways of tackling those challenges, and ways hopefully that generate sustainable, lasting impact. Social enterprises are one of several different options for achieving this. And that's the theme I'm going to just move on to now. It's about understanding what is and isn't a social enterprise. And there is no judgment implied in this, by the way. If you decide that social enterprise is not for you, and you'd rather become a charity, for example, or you'd rather just be a private business that's run on ethical principles, that's absolutely fine. But specifically, this program is designed to support social enterprises, and it's important that we make a clear distinction, or as clear as we can be, about what is and isn't a social enterprise. So that's what I'm going to go on to do next. So you might recognize this fella. This is Bill Gates. And I think Bill Gates makes quite an interesting kind of way of exploring what isn't a social enterprise. Because Bill Gates, of course, is the founder of the tech giant Microsoft. And Bill Gates founded Microsoft many years ago now, and has earned a fortune from it. And of course, it still exists today. On the other hand, Bill Gates has donated over $60 billion to a charity that he founded called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is one of the world's largest charities. He's also recently, quite interestingly, made a pledge to donate 99% of the wealth that he's made over the next 2 decades to fund that foundation's work, with a view to it closing in 2045. Okay, so he's basically giving away a huge amount of money and the vast majority of his personal fortune. Still, of course, probably leaves him a billionaire. He's not going to be, selling the big issue anytime soon. But he is giving away a huge amount of money. So what he's done there is he's used his business to create personal wealth and then become a philanthropist to give that away. So he's used trade to create profit and then given that away for good. And you might disagree with what some of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation does, and that's fine. The point I'm making is he is giving it away, and it is a charity, and it is supposedly doing good things. So the question for you, I suppose, is he a social entrepreneur? Do we think that Microsoft is a social enterprise? It trades and it gave its money away for social good. So is it a social enterprise? Has anybody got any thoughts on that? I can see you shaking your head, Ed, but
Microsoft social enterprise.
No. Very good. And anybody else got any comments on that? Don't be shy. It would be good to hear from people today if we can. I know it's a bit prohibitive sometimes on these online formats, but
I mean, it's set up to make a profit, wasn't it? It wasn't set up to do any good initially.
Yeah, that's one.
And is it more about him as an individual giving the money? Well, I suppose you can't differentiate, but Google's not particularly want to be sociable and give his money. It's that individual, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. He's giving it away individually. It's not his company that's giving it away. It's his own personal wealth that's giving it away. And I think that is one of the differentiators here. Yeah. So giving something back to society, either with your own time or your own wealth, is a great thing. And that's fine. Similarly, if you want to run a business in an ethical manner, so that you do some good as part of running your business, that is also a really, really good thing. But this is not what a social enterprise is. Neither of those things are what a social enterprise is. These are the key point about Bill Gates is two separate things. There's a private business and a charity. And Microsoft's profit is paid to an individual, and that individual gives it away. It makes that individual a philanthropist, but it does not make Microsoft a social enterprise. And similarly, the charity that he's set up, is great that it exists, but it is at the end of the day funded from a profit-making business. It is not intrinsic to that business itself that it would do good in society. There's somebody in the middle that's making a decision and choosing to do that, and it's completely, at his whim as well. At the end of the day, it's also the key thing about the charity as well, is that it's all about giving away money. It isn't sustainable in the long term. It's going to run out of money when it's spent it all. That charity is also, just like Microsoft is not a social enterprise, it's a private business. The charity is also not a social enterprise because it's giving money away. It doesn't have the sustainability that is key to the social enterprise concept. So this is basically not a social enterprise. This is not kind of what we're talking about when we are talking about social enterprise. So let's move on to what actually is a social enterprise then. We know it's not a business that is fantastically successful and just decides to give away some of its profit. And we equally know it's not a charity that is there for philanthropic reasons and doesn't have sustainability built into it. It's something else. Has anybody kind of heard or read or have like a little definition of social enterprise that they have in their own minds? It would be great to hear what people's thoughts are on this before we get into the detail. Hannah, I'm gonna ask you. You set up a CIC already.
For me and our directors, it was seeing a gap in what the public sector offer, and it not being ethically anything that fits nicely with the private sector because of the nature of the work and the families that we're supporting. So it's that bit in the middle, like you said, the third sector, where everything that we do is because of the original ethos, our values, beliefs, and social mission of wanting to make the lives better for disabled children.
Yeah. So something
That's
that you can steer
started.
yourselves. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Anybody else who's, I'm thinking there's a couple here that are set up or very, very close to set up. What did it mean to you?
I was going to say that there's something around the goods or services that you provide being reinvested back into.
Reinvestment.
Bill Gates, what he's done is he's obviously experiencing the benefits of that profit in itself from the product he created, and he's able to have that power to give it back to the charity. Whereas with this, anything coming through, you're obviously reinvesting it back into the mission that you're trying to deliver. So I think that's probably the difference that I've noticed.
Yeah. Reinvesting, that's right, because in the case of Microsoft, the money goes out to the shareholders and then they decide what they want to do with it afterwards. It doesn't flow back into Microsoft to pursue some kind of mission. Yeah, good. Reinvestment's definitely part of it. Reinvestment's definitely part of it. Well, I think, you know, we all as social entrepreneurs, and I've met many hundreds over the years and supported personally dozens of them. We all go into it often with slightly different concepts of what it is. And that's not surprising, because the first thing to really get in your heads about social enterprise is it is not a legally restricted term. Unlike the term charity, which is a legally defined thing, it's actually a tax status. Social enterprise doesn't really have any meaning in law. Anybody can, if Bill Gates wanted to claim to be a social entrepreneur and that Microsoft was a social enterprise, nobody could sue him for that. It's a claimable title with no legal restrictions on its use. Anybody can claim to be one. But those people who work in social enterprises and who support social enterprises tend to have a much clearer set of what they think is and isn't a social enterprise. And I'm going to show you 3 different approaches as to how you define what it is, and explain hopefully why the third approach is the best one. The first thing I want to put up is the dictionary definition. And I can't remember which dictionary this is from, because they vary from dictionary to dictionary as well. But the dictionary definition that I found is this: a business with formalized social or environmental objectives whose surpluses are principally reinvested to pursue that purpose rather than being paid to shareholders and owners. Okay, so it totally goes to what Salma just said about reinvesting. I've picked out what I think the important bits are in that in bold and orange. So interestingly, it starts with a business. So there's definitely something there about kind of trading and trying to trade. It talks about social and environmental objectives, which I think is probably something that is key to everybody here in this room. They've got a sense of that missional drive, that foundational drive to do something good for society. And it also talks about reinvesting the profit. Now, my slight beef with this is that this being paid to shareholders and owners business can be a bit problematic. And one of the areas where it may be problematic is I work with a number of charities who have a trading arm that is a social enterprise, and they may well, that social enterprise may well pay the profit to the charity as an owner or a shareholder in it. And I also have some issues with, well, it kind of depends on who the shareholders are. So I think sometimes it's okay for me, and like I say, it's a subjective judgment at the end of the day. But for me, I don't like that part of that definition, because I can see situations where shareholders in a social enterprise are legitimate and share a common purpose, and therefore we shouldn't say you cannot pay profit to them. So yeah, hi, Eben.
Sorry, Eben. But I get where you're coming from with that, and you know, in terms of the definition about being, getting shareholders being paid. But my experience is, even with the CIC, and it's the reason why it's taken us so long to sort of work out what sort of structure we want, is even with the CIC limited by shares, they, the public sector would much rather work with a CIC limited by guarantee, because the idea that taxpayers' funds might be going towards profit paid to individuals is just not something that sits well. So I don't, I'm not sure, even if we don't agree, I'm not sure there's much we can do about that definition, is there?
Well, I mean, what I would say is you've just given an example why that definition really doesn't work, because a CIC can be limited by shares, and a CIC is most definitely a form of social enterprise and can pay profits to shareholders. But then what you've gone on to talk about is that certain buyers of a service may not like that fact, and that's fine. They don't have to like that fact. That might have severe implications for your business model and how you structure yourselves. But what it doesn't mean is that a CIC limited by shares is not a social enterprise. It just so happens that that particular customer doesn't like the thought of profit leaking out to potential shareholders. It doesn't mean the CIC limited by shares is not a social enterprise. It's simply consumer preference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, of course it does. It does.
Yeah. Let's go on to a kind of a second, and I think probably a much more accessible definition. And this, I like this because this kind of like really helps contextualize what we're talking about here. Social enterprise is as a family of different types of organization, all of which have something in common, which is that they are designed to deliver a specified social benefit through the mechanism of trading and redeployment of profit. So the emphasis here is on a family of different types of organizations, and this helps us kind of celebrate the fact that in the world of social enterprise, we do have a huge variety of different legal structures. We have CICs limited by guarantee, we have CICs limited by shares, we have share capital companies with modified clauses, companies limited by guarantee, community benefit societies, cooperative, various types. There are a lot of different legal structures around, and all of them can legitimately claim to be a social enterprise if they are specifying their social benefit and using trade in some way as part of their existential reason, and redeploying profit to fulfill that social benefit. So that, I think that's a more kind of friendly way of looking at it. And it goes to the heart of exactly what Eben mentioned, which is that some buyers of services don't like the idea of shareholding, and some grant funders don't like the idea of a shareholding existing in social enterprises. But that doesn't mean they're not social enterprises. They are. They're still social enterprises. They set themselves apart from the private sector in other ways. They just have to accept, as a consequence of the structure they have, that there are certain grant funds that may not give them money, and there are certain customers that they may not be happy with. Now, if they've got different sources of income, different customer groups that they're working with, absolutely fine. They're still a social enterprise. So that's kind of another way of looking at it. And I think we can almost simplify that even more. And this is the way I think I encourage people to think of social enterprises. And when I go through these, what I call this traits-based definition, you have a think about your idea or your entity that you've got, and see if it has these traits. And in my sort of view, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. My 4 traits definition, the first thing is it is selling some products and services, or intends to sell products and services of some kind. It doesn't have to be all of its income, but certainly a fundamental part of its existential driver is to sell products and services. Secondly, it has social or environmental aims enshrined formally in some kind of constitution that is legally binding. Okay, and that's a critical thing, really. Thirdly, it has some form of socialized, and by that I mean more than one person owning or controlling it. It's very problematic when you have social enterprises with a single person in control, because it would be very easy for that single person to change their mind and to change the constitution. And this is almost kind of like a way of saying there needs to be a group of people involved in it. And finally, the last trait is it's structured so that profit is used to pursue its social or environmental aims. So it's okay that it makes a profit. We want it to make a profit because it's what it does with that profit that counts. And I've gone for the kind of slightly fuzzier sense of used to pursue to kind of encompass share capital social enterprises that may distribute profits somehow, or some of their profits somehow, but also those who entirely hold that profit within the organization so that it has more resources to deliver more social benefit. So, in summary, we have a dictionary definition that, in my view, is a bit over prescriptive. A more accessible version of that, which definitely stresses this sense in which there's a family of different legal structures here, and then a traits-based definition that you can kind of almost apply to yourselves and your own organizations, or your thoughts about what that organization should look like, and ask yourself the question, do these apply to me, or do these apply to us? And if they do, these traits, then chances are that's a social enterprise that you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to leave that up for a sec and just give people a chance to reflect, comment, or question these, because I think this is a fundamental of social enterprise, and it's right that everybody comes away with this, they're correctly framing their own social enterprise idea and whether it fits with this or not. So, anyone got any queries or comments? Well, if not, I feel like I've done my job. But this is a good time to question things if you want to.
I suppose I'm just thinking, do social enterprise, you've probably already covered this and I'm just not getting the legal entity side of things. Social enterprise obviously has to have a legal structure. And that's still, and we've talked about co-op, we've talked about CICs. Could it be a limited? No, because we've already said that if it's just a limited, if it's just a limited company, could it still be a social enterprise if it's a straight up private limited company with multiple directors?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. There's loads of questions in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my answer. Provided it meets the 4 traits, then it is. But let me just break that apart a little bit, Ed.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you said is, does a social enterprise have to have a legal structure? So it's an interesting concept, this, because I think by legal structure, what we commonly mean is an incorporated entity of some kind. Incorporated in the sense of it's gone on Companies House, it has directors, it reports to Companies House, etc., and also crucially, it has that limited liability aspect, where you're not personally responsible for its actions. And in that sense, actually, you can be a social enterprise without a legal structure, because there is a format of unincorporated social enterprise, where you still have all of these things. There is still a constitution, a formal constitution that is binding between its signatories, but is not actually registered as a limited company and doesn't have limited liability. This is this is basically the not-for-profit, the unincorporated. I'll give it its proper name: the unincorporated voluntary association, which I shorten to UVA. A UVA is potentially a good idea for very early trading, very low levels of trade, where the risk to the individual or individuals involved, it would be individuals, I guess, is low. because you don't have the protection of limited liability. A number of social enterprises that I've seen over the years have started as a UVA, and that is a legitimate social enterprise structure that is not incorporated. And then if they've grown, they later on turn into an actual limited company of some kind. A prime example of that being Sheffield Social Enterprise Network itself, which when I founded it was a UVA. And I believe now, Pete will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a limited company now.
We're a CIC with a large membership structure.
There we go. So it's okay to not have an incorporated entity. That doesn't contravene any of the trades. Okay, so that was the first point. And the second point was, can a company limited by shares, I think what you said, a standard limited company, be a social enterprise? And I would say yes, it could, but it would probably need quite a lot of hacks and modifications to its constitution, because primarily standard share capital companies of the kind that you see all the time in the private sector, the standard template or model articles for those very much looks like, and is in fact, a private sector company, but potentially it could be hacked, modified, edited, and created with more clauses, etc., that means that it conforms to this 4 traits definition. And again, speaking from personal experience, the social enterprise I founded, which was before CICs even existed, was a share capital company that had its constitution hacked and changed in order to kind of enshrine the things that I'm talking about here.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to experience of, you set up a company, it's so easy. It used to, I'm sure it's probably a bit more difficult now with all the identity side of things, but you just get right company's house, here is, you fill out a form, I suppose I don't really even think about like the articles or the constitution, because it all seems to be happening when you set up a limited company. Maybe I didn't pay a huge amount of attention, but hacking that I'm assuming is legal fees and all that sort of stuff. I didn't even think about that sort of thing.
Yes, very expensive, very complicated. I think Eben said that she had a standard share capital company and is now questioning whether that's the right thing. And it is it just feels like you're just click, it's almost gamified, isn't it? The way you register a company now, it's just click, done. Barely even seeing what it is. But yeah, you're right. When I formed mine, there was a huge amount of legal process to go through to do those hacks and to make the modifications that were necessary. But before the existence of CICs, there weren't that many other alternatives. CICs, of course, only came out in 2008. And it's been great to have them because they mean that there is more of a kind of sort of more standardized routes that you can go down without having to pay expensive legal fees. Okay. Any other questions on this? No. Okay. Well, we're going to go into the break very shortly, but just before we do, I want to just play a quick game of a thing that I call Guess the Stat. So this is a little bit of fun, but it's also kind of educational, and it's kind of pens and papers at the ready. We're going to have a series of questions, and you can write down. It's a multiple choice thing, so you can write down what you think the most likely answer is to these questions. Okay. Stick it on a pen and paper or write it digitally or whatever somehow. So we've got the questions will appear obviously in the question column, and then you need to decide whether you think A, B, C, D, or E is the correct answer. Okay, so first question, approximately how many social enterprises are active in the UK? And those stats are from 2024. We've got 10,000, 22,000, 312,780, 90,000, or 131,000. Have a guess at that. Next one, approximately how many people are employed through social enterprises, through or by social enterprises? Got the numbers there ranging from 18,000 right up to 12 million. Have a guess what you think is right. Question 3, what is the annual revenue generated by social enterprises in the UK in 2024? The total annual revenue in 2024. So basically, this is how big is the social enterprise economy, I suppose. 225 million, 78 billion, 6.6 billion, less than 1 billion, or 723 million. Next one, the 5-year survival rate. This is a measure of how long whether a business is still active 5 years after it was incorporated. And the 5-year survival rate for regular businesses is 47%. So 47% of them are still going after 5 years. What is the 5-year survival rate for social enterprises? 66, 39, 45.5, 52, or less than 10%. According to Social Enterprise UK, what percentage of its members made profits or broke even in 2023? So Social Enterprise UK, if you don't know, is the membership body for social enterprises. It's a large national organisation, hundreds of members. And they do this annual survey, which is where a lot of these stats are coming from. But what percentage of its members made a profit or broke even? And then the last question. This is not a Social Enterprise UK stat. This is another thing that I just thought was an interesting stat. What is the legal minimum number of directors for most social enterprise legal structures? The legal minimum, 2, 3, 5, 1, or 0. So you just need to put down for each question A, B, C, D, or E. And as you can tell, probably the reason for doing this is it would be boring to just have the stats on the screen and you read them. Hopefully you can engage with them a little bit more now, and we'll come away from this session at least knowing a little bit more about the size of the social enterprise sector, as well as knowing in a bit more detail what a social enterprise is. Okay, let's go through the answers then. And question 1, there are 131,000 social enterprises in the UK. Active, this is saying active, so there probably is more than that. Some of them will be dormant or what have you. 131,000. I mean, for me, that number it's still relatively low, but it's probably higher than maybe I might have instinctively thought. Don't know how you feel about that, but if you've got E, you can definitely tick that one. What about employment levels in social enterprise? Well, the answer to that, 2.3 million. So yeah, that's quite a lot. That's sort of, I guess, pushing the average. If there are 131,000, putting the average up to 15, essentially, some 15 or so. My maths isn't good enough to do the sums immediately, but yeah, that's quite a sizable number of people. They collectively generate £78 billion in the economy. Yeah, quite. Christina, I saw you giving a wow there. Yeah, I agree. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? That's an impressive amount of money to create. It shows what 130,000 organizations can do collectively. Here's one that's a positive thing. 66% is the survival rate. So 2/3 of social enterprises are still around 5 years after they were created. Better than the private sector. And hopefully encouraging for you as potential founders and social entrepreneurs. So that's a bit of good news. And in terms of profit making, 70% of social enterprises that are members of Social Enterprise UK have either made a profit or broke even. And this is very good news, I think, because we have to, there's a term that sort of does the rounds in that third sector, which is called not-for-profit. And there are too many people that believe they are not supposed to make a profit. And I want to flip that on its head today. And if you only leave here with one thing, I want you to think, I'm trying to create a profit. It's what I do with that profit that's important. And finally, the legal minimum number of directors. So it's one. And this is a surprise, perhaps, for some, I don't know. But the key thing here is that these legal structures that social enterprises can choose from all have templates. And typically when you set one up, you're choosing a template and you may choose to modify bits of it, or you may not. But that template will only actually legally require one director. And if you remember from the traits slide, I said it needs to be more than one person in ownership or control. And it's one of the key points about if you choose to incorporate a social enterprise, you could just do it yourself. But I think other people would look at that and go, until you've got some more directors involved, it's going to be difficult for us to back you, support you, / buy from you. So recruiting other directors is a key developmental milestone on your journey towards social enterprise. Right, did anybody get all of those right? No, I can see some shaking of heads. No, I don't think I'd have got them all right either if I hadn't researched it beforehand. Say again, Ed, sorry.
I said it was actually in terms of the number of the amount of the revenue and the profitability and the number of the profit breaking even. That was impressive. I think, despite the fact that there's quite a few number of them.
Yeah. I think what we get from those, if you kind of zoom out for a minute, what you get from those stats is a sense of quite a lot of SME size, so small and medium enterprise, sort of 5 to 20 employees that are quite successful over a long period of time. There's a steady base of those. And I think then there's a number of others that get incorporated every year, of course, and then some that tail off. But the steady core is actually doing quite well. Okay, all right. There we go. That was Guess the Stat. Hope you enjoyed that as a little bit of a slightly more light-hearted approach to stats, and hopefully learned something from that. We are going to go into a break now, and then in the second half we'll look in a bit more detail at some of the stuff that you should and shouldn't do when you're on a social enterprise, and we'll also look a little bit at legal structures and what your options are on that as well. So what I'm going to do is I will sort of mute and turn my video off for about the next, I'm probably going to say like about 6 minutes. I know it's not a very long break, but we do want to make sure that we keep it on time. So I think you come back here for 11:15 and I'll get underway again. Okay. Thanks very much. See you in a bit. Okay, come back now to the second part of today's session on the fundamentals of social enterprise. It'd be good to just turn your camera on, say hi, so that I know that people are back in the room. Hi, Hannah. Hi. I've just gone to turn my heating up because I don't know about you, but it's pretty chilly here. Hoping some other people will come back.
I'm still here. Sorry, my name is Salma.
Hi, Salma.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Eben.
Sorry, Morgan.
Okay,
It's
and
not E as an Esther, not E as an Ethan.
oh, sorry. Okay, right. Everyone's back. We'll crack on, and I'm going to now talk a little bit about kind of some of the things you need to think about if you're going to run a social enterprise successfully, leading up to the final part, which will be on legal structures. But the first thing I wanted to draw attention to was this concept of the triple bottom line. Have people come across this before? Yeah, I can see a few nods. So the triple bottom line is it's not a legally binding thing, and kind of not everyone who's running a social enterprise has to do it, but it's a good thing to think about as a guiding principle for kind of, I suppose, structuring what you're trying to achieve. The triple bottom, the standard bottom line in accounting speak is that it comes from the sense of the bottom line in the account, which is where your profit is shown. But in social enterprise world, we talk about the triple bottom line, sometimes known as the 3 Ps. And it's a sustainability framework developed by a Harvard professor, sort of about 30 years ago. But essentially, it's a concept that says that firms should commit to measuring their social and environmental impact as well as their financial performance. And the 3 Ps that it refers to are profit, people, and planet. And profit, people, and planet. Yeah. The profit is, of course, you have to have more revenue in the business than costs. The idea with a social enterprise is the surplus is reinvested for growth or used to fund more impact on people or planet. This is the engine, if you like, of social enterprise is the creation of profit. And it's what you do with it that's important. Clearly, in most social enterprises, you will need, if not all, you will need a set of accounts, and that is how you measure your profit. Then we've got people. So social enterprises are supposed to positively impact people, and not just named beneficiaries that are those groups that you have explicitly identified as your social purpose, but potentially also your staff, your users, your customers. It's a different approach. It's implicitly a different approach to how you treat people. And so it's important to think about that in the way that you run your social enterprise. And some of this stuff can come out in an annual report, for example, or a report to the CIC regulator if you are a CIC. It doesn't have to be just about your defined beneficiaries, it's about all people. And then finally, planet. So being conscious of our environmental impact and how we reduce, mitigate, or reverse negative effects, or indeed create positive effects. This is also something that needs to be taken account of in running a social enterprise. It's a different approach to running than running a business, and implicitly you kind of care more about your impact on these things, and should, if possible, think of ways that you can report on and define and measure the positive benefits that you have, as well as simply making a profit. And there are various techniques. I'm by no means an expert in them, but I know there are various techniques you can use for social impact measurement. And I believe Sheffield Social Enterprise Network is doing some work on this at the moment, and may well share the results with its members. But these are things that we should think about, all of these factors in how we run our social enterprise, and if possible, capture and measure them, as well as just capturing and measuring our profit levels. So this is a concept that you might come across, and you know, potentially take it further into a more formalized system. Yeah, there's a question, I think. Is that a raised hand there?
Sorry, before you move on from the slide, so private limited companies are allowed to have losses, carry forward their losses, all of that. Are you saying that social interest companies aren't allowed to have losses?
No, you can have a loss, and you would carry forward that loss in the same way in accounting terms as a standard company. I guess the point is design the company and its business model to try and generate a profit, because if you generate losses regularly, that's going to lead to the closure of the company.
Okay, thanks.
Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that was coming probably from me sort of trying to correct a misconception that that it was important that, or some people believe it is important that we, as social entrepreneurs, actually don't book a profit in our accounts, and that's definitely a misconception. It's fine to book a profit in your accounts, because if you don't make a profit, you are making losses, and eventually you'll go out of business. Okay. Oh, I think Pete's posted something in the chat about a program on social impact measurement, which I knew there's a link there that you can follow if you want to take through this thinking. Okay. Yeah, this isn't a formal commitment for social enterprises, but a well-run social enterprise could or potentially should measure these things when it is established and has its business model working. Next, I just want to talk about the kind of things that you will be kind of, I suppose, signing up to if you're going to run a social enterprise. This is a bullet pointed list. Obviously, these slides will be shared after the session. So this, there might be a fair bit of writing on the screen, but they're written down for the reason of circulating afterwards. But these are the things that you'll need to do as a founder of a social enterprise. Firstly, you have to be able to articulate exactly what your social aims are, and you will write them down and embed them in some way in a constitution. Okay, and it is really a very fundamental part of being a social enterprise. You need to be able to say what your social aims actually are in a concise, well articulated manner, because you'll be using and reusing that many times over the course of your career in social enterprise. Okay. Secondly, you may be eligible for grants, but principally there's an intention to trade. You need to have something to sell on the market. If you cannot see anything that you can monetize or sell, social enterprise may not be the right route for you. Thinking again, if you still feel like, okay, that third sector thing you talked about, Morgan, that is me, but I just don't have anything I can sell or trade with, then that marks you out as potentially a charity instead. Okay, the whole reason you would choose social enterprise over charity is there is this intention to be trading. I mean, that's not the only reason, but that's one of the core reasons. Okay. It is acceptable to make a profit. What's a non-profit? That's a difficult phrase that actually comes to us from the Americans, where what we conventionally see as a charity over in America, that's known as a non-profit. So yeah, it's okay to make a profit. It's what you do with it that counts, because profits will be used to pursue social environmental aims. Now, I have, again, just correcting a misconception that some people might have, not necessarily you, but I've come across in the past, that what we need to do if we do make a profit is give that away to somebody else, or give it to a cause, a bit like the whole Microsoft example. But the point here is, you don't have to kind of give it away. You can just retain that profit within the business to allow you to grow the social enterprise and improve its delivery of its social impact. So retention of profit in the entity is absolutely fine, and that is exactly the sort of thing that is expected in the world of social enterprise. Also, just a quick point on profit. If you do have or are going to get an incorporated form of social enterprise, i.e. one with a legal structure, if you make a profit, which hopefully you will do, you will still pay corporation tax on that profit, just like a private business. This came as a big surprise to me when I got my first corporation tax bill, and I was like, what do you mean? I'm going to retain this profit and use it for social purpose. But no, you will have to pay corporation tax. There are no tax breaks for profit in social enterprise. Very different, of course, to charities who do have various tax breaks. Paying people. So you can pay the founders, or i.e. people that become the directors. And I think most of you here probably count as those people. You can pay yourself as a staff member from the social enterprise that you form. And there are no legally defined limits or caps to pay levels. So it's okay to found a social enterprise, become one of its directors, and have a salary. That's fine. Again, with a charity route, if you become a charity instead, you typically have to choose between being a member of its board or being a member of staff. Difficult to be both, because board members are not supposed to benefit financially from the activities of a charity. And yeah, no legally defined limits or caps to pay levels, but obviously you can only really pay what's affordable depending on the business model that you've got and the amount of profit you're making. Another thing that you're signing up to is that you're going to share that governance piece, that control piece, with probably 2 or more other people. 3 is often seen by funders and some customers as evidence of being a social enterprise, and as a qualifying criteria for a grant or a program like this. And a minimum of 3 is usually preferred, and often the phrasing is unrelated parties, so not married, not brother and sister or what have you. This is different to what is the legal minimum, which is, as I said in the guess the stat game, at 1. The legal minimum is 1. It's just that in the eyes of the rest of the social enterprise world, you need to have 3 or more typically. The people who are like really connected to your social aims are really prized as board members, and similarly people who've got really important skills or deep experience of the sector are also, most prized as board members when you form your board, but not always possible to get hold of at first. And I often say, like, the most important skill or quality in your first board members is they are willing to turn up to meetings, they are willing to give an opinion, and they're willing to stand down if somebody better comes along. So that's a bit about governance and the need to create a board. You should be keen on demonstrating how you're achieving your social aims, and that's where that triple bottom line and the social impact measurement can come in. It's all very well saying that you're delivering some kind of social benefit, but you should be keen on actually demonstrating that. And this piece about articulating how and why we're making a difference is probably something that really is one of the reasons why some social enterprises survive and some don't. The viability of your social enterprise in the long term is going to be down to the principles of good business management. Getting money in, not spending it all. Making sure that everybody knows what they're doing, that you've got solid systems, processes, procedures in place. Though all of those, showing leadership and the governance level, thinking strategically about the opportunities and threats and risks and managing those things. These are all principles of good business management. They apply to a standard private company just as much as they apply to a social enterprise. And really, no amount of grant funding is going to bail you out of these principles being what affects your viability in the long term, essentially. And so I guess as a founder, you need to remember that you're not just a founder with a great idea or a really valid bit of social impact to create. You're going to have to ensure that the social enterprise is run along good business principles. The final point to make, if you're signing up for a social enterprise, it's a really bad choice if you want to get rich. Very rarely come across rich social entrepreneurs, and quite rightly too, because they're not supposed to be doing that. But you will be essentially, creating a legal structure that prevents you from making millions out of your business idea. So just bear that in mind when you're founding it. It rarely happens these days, but in the past we have had some people whose motivations for being a social enterprise possibly questionable. But just to be clear, you're not going to get rich from this route and choosing this route. Okay. Any questions about any of that stuff? No? All clear? People still happy to kind of say, yeah, I want to set a social enterprise despite all of that stuff? Okay, good. I'm glad to have retained everyone's interest. Oh, there's a blip. What does that mean? There's a raised hand. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I keep asking questions. Apologies, because it's not.
That's all right.
So in terms of the number of directors, obviously, as a lot of people know, especially if when you start out small, you're happy to not pay yourself, especially when you're trying to grow the business. It's a bit difficult to sort of, when you've got to find people with the same commitment to, to be joint directors with you, but then also asking for that they not be remunerated for their time. How does that work, especially in a social enterprise where it's not like there is no enticement, there's no getting rich at the end of it. How are you able to attract other directors to the cause? Yep,
great question. Well, the first thing to say is they can be remunerated. It's subject to affordability in terms of the business model. There's nothing to prevent you from paying a small salary to a non-executive director. I mean, there's nothing to prevent you from paying a large salary, but that might seem like a dubious use of the funds of the business when you've got social impact to create. But there's nothing to stop you from paying a small salary that's ethically sound and may make good business sense if they're bringing deep connections of value to the business. So that's one thing to say. But yeah, quite right. How do you attract them? They are likely to be people who care about the cause as much as you. They are likely to be people who've got some time on their hands, perhaps older people, retired people, who want to invest that time into something they see as good. You do find that some people are attracted to the idea of doing good, but not through the means of a charity, because they, for their whatever personal reasons, perhaps they were a previous entrepreneur or something, they think that charities aren't sustainable, or that, you know, they don't have that kind of drive to keep themselves alive through trading. And maybe that person wants to do good, but also shares this concept that it needs to be done through the medium of trading so that it's sustainable. You may have people who simply like you as the founder and want to support you personally with what you're trying to do. The typical commitment of time is, it should be anyway, relatively minimal. The function of a board is not to get involved in the day-to-day running of that organization. The function is to set strategy, hold the management to account, keep a general steer on the governance of the organization. So typical social enterprise boards are meeting, you know, sort of every 2 months, maybe once a quarter, and just providing that kind of steering and strategy function. It shouldn't involve a huge amount of time. So yeah, there's a few things to think about there that might help you attract the right sort of people. The other thing, of course, you can get from being a board member of social enterprise is a little bit of kudos and credibility, and that might be something that it's worth trading on for expedient reasons, as long as it's the right person. Some people just like to say, "Oh yeah, I'm involved in that." It's a way of sort of showing that you're valued and valid and an important person. It's quite common as well, I've got to say, for social enterprise board members in early stage social enterprises to be perhaps not quite the right person, but as long as they are supportive and are willing to stand down when somebody better comes along, that's okay. I think that's okay. It's rare to get the perfect board straight away, I would say.
Thank you.
Okay, pleasure. Okay, and anyone else with a comment on that? If not, we'll just go through this little checklist then. So I pulled this slide together just as a double check, really, to make sure is this right for you as a founder. You now know, hopefully, what a social enterprise is and isn't, and you get a sense of the common misunderstandings and actually what you are signing up for. But now there's a quick sense check then on the pros and cons, the risks and responsibilities. Because one thing I've learned about social enterprise over the years is you have to be comfortable with these and embrace these, because there will be a lot of setbacks and there will be a lot of times where you think, why did I do this? So you need to be sure of these. Okay, so the negatives, the potential negatives here. It is really hard to make a profit. It's really hard for a business to make a profit. It's even harder for a social enterprise to make a profit because it's carrying this kind of social mission. There are sometimes tensions between the social mission and its business imperatives. It's difficult to make a profit anyway, particularly in the kind of areas in the middle of that private and public sector bit. So bear that in mind, it's going to be difficult. The second thing, most likely you are personally going to take lower financial returns than you would have had if it was just a standard private business. There is a bit of tax optimization. If you own a standard business, you can pay yourself through dividend and you get a little bit of tax benefit from it. Whereas if you're working for a social enterprise as its managing director, you're more likely to be on a salary. So it's probably lower financial returns than if you went into pure private business with this. It can be really hard to sell shares or indeed the whole company to an investor or a buyer. So some people who found private companies, grow them to a certain size and then realize they can sell them to somebody else, and that's how they kind of cash in from the work that they've done. Very difficult to do that in the world of social enterprise. That's probably not going to be like an exit that's on the cards for you. It's a little bit more complicated in terms of administration and reporting than a private business. It needn't be ridiculously complicated at all, but there is a little bit more onus, particularly around that triple bottom line stuff, maybe an annual report to the KIC regulator, and generally having a more vocal board than you might do if you were just doing it on your own as a share capital company. Some people do have concerns about sharing control. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that they could be outvoted by their two non-exec directors that they bring in. That can be a problem for people. And if you've got concerns about that, then this is definitely something to dwell on before you incorporate and intend to go down this social enterprise route. Of course, if you do incorporate as a director, you will have legal duties and responsibilities. Companies House is really good at producing a kind of fact sheet on the roles and responsibilities of a director. These apply to you whether you're a social enterprise that is incorporated anyway, or whether you're a private business. You'll have the same set of legal duties either way. And of course, the other thing about running a social enterprise is you kind of have to be comfortable with that tension between social and financial imperatives. So be prepared for that to be a bit of a constant tension. I often meet social entrepreneurs who maybe have running their business for 20 years and they're still on the board or what have you. And they're still wondering, should I be more profit making or should I be a bit more social impact focused? There is always that tension. It never goes away. You have to be comfortable with living with that tension. Thanks for that intervention, Pete, as well, about the KIC regulator. Yeah, appreciate that. It's going to be closed and Companies House will take on the responsibilities. Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's functionally the same thing, but it's just being housed within Companies House. That's my understanding. Okay, so there's some of the negatives. What about some of the positives? Okay, so number one, a feeling of doing something good, okay, in the way that you want to do it, achieving that social impact in the way that you want to do it, not in the way the public sector does it, and certainly not in the way the private sector does it. That is a thing that you will always get from being a social enterprise, and something that is a reward for you personally, that kind of feeling of doing good. There is potential to earn a sustainable living with a social enterprise. Setting up a charity is if you're going to be on the board of it, is probably not a way to earn a living, but this social enterprise can be. You will, if you comply with all of the kind of traits that I've mentioned, you will be in the frame for some grant funding, potentially small grants that are designed to support social enterprises. And that those initial grants that you can get, usually under 20,000 or so, can be really helpful in getting you underway and seeing you through your first couple of years as you build up your business model. So there is support there for this route. You can win trust and respect of stakeholders, important organizations and people involved in whatever the area is that your social enterprise is benefiting, you can win their trust and win their respect. And you, as a result of that, you go up in their estimation, they're more likely to work with you in future. You're creating the seeds of a more sustainable intervention. And you're also join a supportive social enterprise community, not just Sheffield Social Enterprise Network, which you could become a member of, but there's a wider family of social enterprises that you'd be part of. The conferences, events, networking, etc., all available, and you'll find a lot of like-minded people there. Another thing is that it can align quite nicely with your personal beliefs and motivations. So if you are coming at this, what we said as the start, this kind of failure of the market and the private and the public sector, if you want to address that, if you really feel passionately about addressing that, this is a great route for doing it. It's the ideal route to encapsulate and enshrine those twin drivers of being sustainable and delivering social impact. And finally, you can win all sorts of awards and accolades and prizes and things like that for the work that you do. This is a nice thing to have. As speaking as somebody who's won these things in the past, it does feel good, and it's nice to get a bit of recognition for what you do. Okay, so have a think about those positives and negatives, and hopefully that will help you frame whether this is the right route for you. Because now we're going to go on in the last sort of 15 minutes or so to look at some of the common legal structures for social enterprise, what they are and aren't, and what they do and don't do. So the first thing to explain is that what you'll see now are just some of the family, if you remember that definition, of different legal structures that we call social enterprise. This is not an exhaustive list. If it was, it would just go on far too long and be too overwhelming, but it does embrace the most common forms. Also, it's worth saying, as when I was responding to Ed earlier, you don't have to incorporate to become a social enterprise. There are unincorporated voluntary associations that are considered to be social enterprises, but are not formally on Companies House and don't have that limited liability status. And I'm happy to delve a bit into that after going through this slide. So how do you choose the right social enterprise structure for you? So there's lots of different ways of doing this, and I think the way that doesn't work, and I know this from a lot of experience of delivering these kind of workshops, the way that doesn't work is to try and read up on every single form of social enterprise legal structure and then make sense of that and pick one from almost becoming an expert in social enterprise legal structures. That sort of doesn't work because it's just absolutely overwhelming, the options, and you will very quickly get stuck in analysis paralysis. I think equally the way that doesn't work is asking ChatGPT, because it can make a lot, it does make mistakes and get things wrong. I think a better way of doing it is to sort of say, well, I'm not the first person to have set one of these up. Lots of people have done it in the past. How did they do it? Where did they go? And I will show you this method that I use to help people funnel their way through that decision tree into the right one. And I call it the spectrum approach. So what I've put up on the screen is a spectrum from left to right of social purpose and trading activity. Okay, so right at this left-hand end would be people who are coming into this primarily from a social impact perspective, for whom trading is only ever going to be a small part of what they do, but it might still be there in some way. And if you can think of it as like right at the very end, I mean, off this scale actually, but right at the very end of that would be just pure philanthropy. I want to do good, but I've got no interest in trading at all. It's Bill Gates's foundation. It just gives money away. That would be right at the extreme end of this. And then to an extent, there's then almost a compromise between social impact and the amount of trading you want to do as you come across. And then towards the right hand end of this, there is a clear sense of trading and commercializing something, and the social impact is there, but it's kind of not as fundamental to the idea as the trading part. And again, right at the extreme end of this, probably off the end of the spectrum, would be just a regular private business that has no sense and doesn't care what kind of social impact it makes. Now, a lot of social entrepreneurs will find themselves somewhere on this spectrum, this tension between profit making and delivering social impact. You kind of have a think about where on that spectrum you might be, because what we tend to find is that there are four main categories of legal structure that kind of correspond with where you might be on that spectrum. So this corresponds to kind of like this end of the spectrum. This corresponds to that end, and then you've kind of got these in the middle that correspond broadly, slightly to the left of that spectrum and slightly to the right of that spectrum. Hopefully that's making sense. So have a think about where you might be, and I'm just going to talk through these different kind of headline categories and what they are and aren't. So you can hopefully select the right one for you. This is also for people who've already incorporated a good opportunity when your model comes up to ask any questions you've got specific about that legal entity that you've got. Okay, so starting then at the social purpose end with the first legal entity, which is a CIO, which stands for Charitable Incorporated Organization, CIO. This one is a charity. It is the route by which you form a new charity these days. And it is created to deliver a very tightly focused public benefit. Now, by that I mean it literally needs to have its public benefit. It's the same really as social aims. We've talked about social enterprises have social aims written into the Constitution. If you pick a CIO, then you need to show how your social aims basically benefit the public. And there is a list of, I think it's 14 different acceptable formats for benefiting the public, which a charity has to show that it's going to do one or more of those. Okay, and that then gets written into its constitution. This is a good structure if most of its income is from grants or donations somehow, or perhaps that it doesn't have that much income, but it gets stuff. It gets stuff for free. It can do some trading, but there are restrictions on what it can trade and the extent of its trade. The key thing is, if you were thinking, I want to do quite a lot of trading, you probably wouldn't pick this route. It is allowed to use the term registered charity because it will register with, not with Companies House, but with the Charity Commission. The trustees, which is the same as the board, the trustees accept they won't benefit financially from the activities. So you're talking about a voluntary board here who don't get paid. If you're the founder and you want to be in control, you really have a bit of a decision. I can either be the founder and become a board member and not draw a salary, or I can be a member of staff and be the chief exec. And yes, I might attend board meetings, but I'm not able to vote in that board meeting. There are some exceptions around these rules, but that's the gist of it. And this is another thing. Growth beyond its initial scope is not particularly important to it. It is there to deliver the certain social benefit or public benefit in the parlance of charities that it was set up for, and it doesn't really do anything other than that. It can't come up with a new business idea and go off in a different direction. That isn't quite what this particular entity is there for. Okay, so that's the CIO. If you pick that, you're picking becoming a charity. The next one is the Company Limited by Guarantee, or CLG. This is an old legal structure that is pretty much as old as the share capital company. Dates back, I don't know exactly when, but certainly over 100 years old. It's not a charity, but it's quite a flexible legal structure and could apply for charity status, charitable status, I should say, in future. So typically you could set up a company limited by guarantee as a social enterprise, and run that social enterprise. And if it doesn't, if you realize actually we should have become a charity, you can retrospectively apply for charity status. You'll probably have to make some changes to the constitution, but it is a viable route. These other routes, this one and this one, they can't turn into charities. You can't keep the same one. You'd have to wind that company down and start a new one as a CIO. So this is what I call a very flexible structure. The other bits of flexibility in it is that it can freely define its own social purposes. So there is no specific regulator of social purposes in this. It can be set up for anything you want. Very different to CIO, where you have to pass the public benefit tests of the Charity Commission, and also very different to a CIC, which is this one, where your social aims have to be approved by the KIC regulator, or Companies House as it will become. So in CLGs, it just, you write your own one in. But what you are doing with the CLG is locking in the profit into the business, into the retention. The profit is retained and used to pursue social purpose. Classic social enterprise stuff. You can grow and diversify, fine. But also there's a couple of other things it doesn't have that are expected in social enterprise world, including an asset lock. You can modify these articles to put an asset lock in, but they're not there by default, and you might find that some funders insist on it. Okay, a little bit conscious of time, so I'll skip on now to the CIC. Now, technically, CIC is not a legal structure; it's a denomination. But I'm not going to bore you with the details on that. Think of it as a form of social enterprise. It's definitely a social enterprise. It is a legal structure that was created to allow social entrepreneurs like you to easily adopt an off-the-shelf constitution without having to hack about with a company limited by guarantee or hack about with a share capital company. So it's a structure that you can relatively easily adopt without needing to pay lawyers a lot of money. There's a few things that are in there that are vital to understand. One of them is that the social aims that you specify when you set it up have to be approved by the KIC regulator, or as Pete says, Companies House. That's not a particularly onerous task. It's simpler. That there isn't really time to go into it in detail now, but it's not as difficult as you might think. It's there to trade, so yeah, brilliant. It involves a rejection of the charity option. In other words, if you go with this, you can't turn it into a charity. But at the same time, you want some recognition of the genuineness of your social purpose. This is a good way to do it, because you go on a list of CICs, you use the term CIC in your name, and you produce this annual impact report that explains how you've delivered what you said you were going to deliver in terms of social impact. There is a transparency to CICs. It also contains in its wording the asset lock that so many grant funders like to have. The key thing to recognize is that a CIC actually comes in lots of different, what I call flavors or versions. I think there are six different versions, and some of those are CICs based around shares, and some of them are CICs based around the concept of guarantee. And I think this is what I think it was Salma was saying earlier about CICs and share capital. You can have a CIC limited by shares, and you could also have a CIC limited by guarantee. So it's not enough to just say, I'm going to be a CIC. You then also have to make further decisions about which particular form of CIC you want. And then finally, a company limited by shares. This is essentially a share capital company, a standard private business that has probably been hacked around with and has had clauses changes and things added to it and taken away from it, etc., etc. In that sense, it can adjust the model articles and create a social enterprise from that. The challenge you have, though, is that although in the founder's eyes it is a social enterprise, potentially in lots of other organizations' eyes it is a social enterprise, there are people that will say no, it's not, and it's something that you have to kind of embrace and accept if you go down this route. So for example, this is how there being no CIC at the time, this is how I founded mine. And what I found was, yes, we could get social investment. Yes, we could get small amount of social enterprise seed funding, but no, we could not get national lottery funding. They said we weren't the social enterprise. Other people said, oh, you're not really a social enterprise, are you? So you get a lot of that. And unless somebody has a really compelling reason for going down this route, I would say it's not for the people that I've heard about this morning. So the choice for most of you will be some form of CIC or potentially a company limited by guarantee. As a kind of a fringe option, maybe somebody might want to look at a CIO and others might want to look at a CLS, but I think that's unlikely. Okay, it is 12 o'clock. I did say I would mention other options. I mean, I've got a slide on that very briefly, but I think what I'll do is I'm going to stop the screen share for now, and say that pretty much that is the end of the presentation. Like we said at the start, this is the first half of a one-day boot camp. The in-person version then takes what we've heard so far and helps you build a business model around a particular form of social enterprise that you choose to adopt. We're not going to be doing that now, but I will throw the kind of floor open to questions about legal structures or anything else that we've heard during the course of this morning. So happy to field those now.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to sort of go back to the cooperative. Where did the cooperative sit under those four?
Yeah, okay. So cooperatives come under other structures, and I think that's on there now. So there's a few things to say about cooperatives. So in a way, we could have an entire session of a similar length of time talking about cooperatives, because it's a complicated thing to get your head around. Cooperatives, again, there's a quick analogy to make. The cooperatives, again, just like social enterprise, is a family of different legal structures. So are cooperatives, a family of different legal structures. Cooperatives, what it's about is the governing principles of the organization. It's about democracy, actually. It's about whether it's one person, one vote, members get to vote. Those are the main sort of principles. There are others as well, but it's about how you govern an organization, not about why it exists necessarily.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
But one thing I was going to draw attention to is the community benefit society is a legal structure that is particularly designed for cooperatives. So although you do get a family of different organizations that can be a cooperative, actually a community benefit society is that kind of like the preferred idea for them. Good post by Pete. Cooperatives UK website is a great learning resource for cooperatives. and they are probably the right people to turn to. Some cooperatives are social enterprises, some aren't. They are just kind of different concepts, really, and that's how it breaks down. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I just ask, if you set up a social enterprise and then you go and get a full-time job, in some money, can you carry that social enterprise on and still be like the director of a social enterprise? But yeah,
so it depends whether you became incorporated or unincorporated to an extent. But if, let's assume you become incorporated as a CIC, just for argument's sake, you can go and get a job, absolutely fine. The CIC will still exist until such point as it is wound up. But you will have ongoing duties in respect of running that CIC. And principally they're around the basic things about communicating with Companies House, filing accounts, etc., etc. So those duties will still be there in the background, and I guess there's a point at which you need to consider: do we actually make this a dormant company? Because a dormant company notifies Companies House, we'll still be around, but we're not doing anything. And if there's a real sense in which actually you can't really do that much, but you don't want to close it because it might come back, dormant might be an option that you could file for, and then it reduces those responsibilities then.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Any other questions? No? Okay. So, Pete, I think we are done.
We are. Thanks ever so much, Morgan. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I've just stopped the recording of this session, partly because I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes. I'm not sure if you have to dash off, Morgan, in case anybody's got any more detailed questions. Just to explain, because I know there was something about this in the chat, this is an online version and a slightly sort of shortened version of our kind of full in-person boot camp, so which we'll be delivering again in an expanded way in January, and you're perfectly welcome to come along again if hearing some of this stuff for a second time is useful.